Yankee Doodle went to town, riding on a pony. He stuck a feather in his hat and called it, you know what? Yes, macaroni. You all know that song, but now you'll know the story. Now, once upon a time, not far from here, the French and British battled over who would farm and hunt and trap and live along these lands. At that time, the 1750s, the French-Indian War, or better call it the 7 Years' War, a Dr. Richard Shuckburgh, who served as surgeon for the British Army, sat watching the river from his post at Fort Craylow, along the Hudson River. He saw a sloop dock. Then he noted dozens of men disembarking. He knew at once these were locally sourced militia, farmers turned fighters from the colony of Connecticut. They were under the command of a Colonel Thomas Fitch V. Now this doctor was accustomed to fine fighting forces and splendid red coats and blue coats for uniforms. Instead, he found these fellows, holes in their clothes, patches patching their frocks, their breeches buckled up high, their stockings, slipping down. What a ragtag of a crew, thought Shuckburgh. Ha! Look at these boss loppers. Why, they've topped themselves off with feathers in their hats. What a bunch of doodles. They think fine fashion means to stick a turkey feather into your tricorn. Ha! They think they're fine fighting fops, dressed up like macaronis. Aren't these new troops just dandy? Ha! The good doctor got a notion. That night he would dine with other British officers. Dr. Shuckburgh determined, I'll make up a little song, a little ditty, to show these doodles they need to mind the music as they come to join the King's army. In their fine red coats. Oh, I'm sure it will be quite a sensation with the other officers. The doctor then began with a little tune he recalled listening to whilst in London. La 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 la. La 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 la, something about Lucy Locket and her pocket. Ah, that gives me what I need to start. He changed the words, using a little nickname he had heard from the Dutch folk living around Albany for the Connecticut colonists. They call them Yankees, or Yankees. Now you better hold your noses, because Yankees in Dutch roughly means Johnny Stinky Cheese. See, the Dutch held their noses whenever the English came from Connecticut here into what was then the New Netherlands, now New York, and many of the English were named John, and all of them seemed to reek of their own form of pungent cheese. Thus, the Dutch called them Jan or John, and Kees for stinky cheese. Jan Kees not only think feathers in their hat makes them fashionable macaronis. Thus, these colonial folks are doodles, fools, dead wood in their head. And worse. Here we are, helping them fight against the French, thought Dr. Richard Shuckburgh. That makes them, why, just children. And how do children travel? On ponies. Thus, he had his first verse. Yankee Doodle went to town, riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. It means Johnny Stinky Cheese, the fool, rides to town like a child. He thinks he's dressed like a dandy, but he better mind his music and watch his step, or we may steal away one of his girlfriends. Thus, There it was, along the banks of the Hudson River in the 1750s. The song Yankee Doodle was born, meant to tease and later even bully those ragtag Americans. And for years to come, the British, especially their soldiers, used that song against these Americans, especially when they began to have the audacity to rebel against the king. Now, in April of 1775, the Revolutionary War broke out, with a shot heard round the world from Lexington and Concord, or as they say up there, Concord. Well, those Americans were not conquered. Indeed, why, when the British came storming out of Boston trying to find the supply depots, what a rude awakening they had when the Americans gathered and chased them away. And what song did those Americans use to chase off those redcoats? Yankee Doodle, as if to say, you called us Yankee Doodles, well, we're chasing you away, so what does that make you? Worse than Johnny Stinky Cheese, the Doodle. Well, some of the redcoats were so crazed hearing the song again and again, why, one even cried, "Damn, I'm tired of dancing to that danged tune." The Americans beat their drums, and they filled the redcoats' heads with Yankee Doodle. And some of the words the Americans used to fill the head of the redcoats went like this. Father and I went down to camp, along with Captain Gooding, and there we saw the men and boys, as thick as hasty pudding. Now, hasty pudding was kind of thin, but in the song it says, yea, we may be kind of thin now, but the more you stir things up, with your king working against us, the thicker we will get. Well, the British bullied back. They made up verses of their own, like, Yankee Doodle came to town for to buy a firelock, but we will tar and feather him, likewise we will John Hancock. Oh, they were saying, you rebellious doodles, how dare you turn against our king? We will cover you with hot, sticky tar and feathers, and we'll do the same to one of your leaders, John Hancock. Well, the Americans came back with a retort of their own, singing out about one of their leaders. And there rode General Washington upon a strapping stallion, giving orders to his men, I guess there were 1,000,000. See how quick that pudding turns into 1,000,000 men? Soon the colonists, under the leadership of George Washington, were fighting harder and harder for independence. But the British, of course, came back with a retort of their own, and there rode General Washington upon a snow-white charger. He looked as big as all outdoors, but thought that he was larger. Well, on went the redcoats, mocking the Americans all the more with, Yankee Doodle took a saw, with patriots' devotion, to trim the tree of liberty, according to his notion. He set himself upon a limb, just like some other noodle. He cut between the tree and him, and down came Yankee Doodle. Listen, Yankee Doodle, cut yourself off from Mother England, and you will fall down and break your doodle. And on went the song, through hundreds of verses, British bullying, Americans bringing themselves back up to battle. And then at last, the big one, not too far from here, at Saratoga, the turning point of the Revolution. There the American patriots, led by General Granny Horatio Gates and Benedict the Traitor Arnold, with help from Thaddeus Kosciuszko, they managed to halt the British. When they won the battle, Gentleman Johnny Burgoyne had to surrender his redcoat army. And what song did the victorious Americans play? Why, you guessed it, Yankee Doodle. Well, this music provided a kind of music to the ears of the French king, and he agreed to help the American cause. Now, lastly, that song was also sung at the final battle of the American Revolution, 1781, Yorktown, Virginia. Now, led by the Marquis de Lafayette and Alexander Hamilton, the American Continental Army forced the British Redcoat Army right into the sea, where the French Navy stopped them. Now, when the surrender ceremony came, the British generals attempted to surrender their swords to the French. That would be far less humiliating than surrendering to those ragtag Yankee Doodles. The Marquis de Lafayette spied this, and quickly he ran over to the American musicians and exalted them, "Play Yankee Doodle!" And not only did they play, but all the Americans began to sing. And at that, the redcoats turned to face the music, and at that moment, watch your step, the Americans were handy. They stepped up and accepted the British surrender. So, let's acknowledge how a song went from being something to tease and bully Americans, turned into something to show American grit and gumption. So let's all rise now and sing. Yankee Doodle went to town, riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music, watch your step, and with the girls be handy. And now say, huzzah for Yankee Doodle.